Hello, welcome to another managerial special from the Honest Football Podcast. I'm Craig Savage. With me, as always, is Mr. Daniel Cody. The championship is in full swing of managerial changes, and this time we are going to the Stadium of Light as Sunderland have sacked Tony Mowbray and have hired Michael Beale as their new head coach. We'll get onto him in a second, but let's talk about the previous head coach in Tony Mowbray. Sacked after what we feel is he done a remarkable job. Took Sunderland, obviously, over from Alex Neil pretty much the start of last season, and guided them after being promoted from League One to the Championship playoff semi-final.
Yeah, obviously we came up against them more than any other side last year, so we know pretty well what they were doing, and you covered it nicely. He did not just a good job, but an exceptional job. They were a club that don't forget when he took over, what was it, a day or two before deadline day last season, there was a little bit of worry about after Alex Neil had left, just after taking them up, were they going to end up back in a relegation battle? And not only did they get to the playoffs, I think it's fair to say, particularly away from home, they were incredibly entertaining to watch on the counter-attack. They scored goals galore. They had a front four that were a continuous threat against everyone. I mean, they were unfortunate to draw 1-1 at ours in the league fixture because they played us off the park for the second half. And it was exciting football. It was attacking football. It was young players playing fearlessly, probably some of the statements we've seen previously this season in the Championship. And to get to the playoffs, and let's be fair, they beat us in the first leg, and in the second leg, they were unfortunate they didn't have any centre-halves available, which we saw where Luton's goals came from. It probably would have been a much tighter game if they'd had them fit. They were a hair's breadth away from getting to Wembley in a playoff final, which would have been a remarkable effort. So to then start this season, he left them or was sacked when they were in 9th place, one win away from the playoffs, which they then got that weekend under the interim manager. Considering they lost their star striker on deadline day in Ross Stewart, considering they hadn't been able to get Diallo back, I mean, he continued to churn over a very good side that, yes, wasn't playing quite as expansive football all the time, but was still delivering results and was still on the front foot for the most part, again, with young players at the centre of it. So for me, it was an incredibly harsh sacking. And while you don't mind that as a football club, and we've talked about it already once this season with the John Eustace one at Birmingham, you want the replacement to be inspiring. And in both of these cases, I don't feel it has been. But this one, probably not even got the benefit of being commercially successful, which you might be able to argue on the Birmingham front. So all seems a bit odd to me. But I think if we look back purely at Tony Mowbray, there's no denying, no matter what you think of him, because I'm quite a big fan and I know you're not, there's no denying he did a remarkable job.
No, obviously I criticised his time at Blackburn, and I thought his style got too stale, and for Blackburn it was always close to that playoff marker, and obviously didn't succeed in that time, and obviously didn't get a new contract, and went on to go to Sunderland the next season. And I do have to give him praise because I didn't expect Sunderland to be up there, considering how young their squad is, and they've got some very talented young players. To get them into the playoffs, yes, some teams messed up near the end of that run, but Sunderland just had that really good momentum, and yeah, it's just a shame that obviously it just wasn't meant to be. See, Luton done enough in the second leg. They said injuries got in the way, and I think Luton found that out quite early on in that second leg. That's punishing, but overall, I don't think any Sunderland fan, who are a very passionate fan base, and I do respect a lot of Sunderland fans, the fact is that they're higher up the table than they probably anticipated at the end of last season. So yeah, I think they're a bit more realistic, and obviously we'll get on to the new man this season for now. But yeah, I don't think they seem too happy from the responses that we've seen so far, and last few days when it started to find out that it was going to be this new man in charge. But 40% win record for Mowbray, just isn't too bad. It's actually really good. And that's just in the Championship. So, yeah, you have to give him a lot of credit. But we'll move on to the new man in charge. His name is Michael Beale, the former QPR and Rangers manager. The statement is as follows from Sunderland. Michael Beale has signed a contract until the summer of 2026 at the Stadium of Light, and starts his role on Monday, return the coaching 2 months after leaving Rangers Football Club. After an exceptional spell leading to the first team on an interim basis, Mike Dodds has taken the next step on his pathway and has been promoted to the role as assistant head coach. He took charge of 3 games and won 2 and lost 1. Michael Proctor and Alessandro Berraccini will continue with their respective roles as the club strive to build beyond the foundations established throughout the past 2.5 seasons. Our 10-month tenure in Scotland followed Beale, with who guided Rangers to the 2023 Scottish League Cup final and departed Ibrox Stadium with the highest top-flight win percentage of 77.42% in the club's history. The sporting director, Christian Speakman, said, "We're monitoring Michael's career for some time, and we are delighted to have reached an agreement for him to become our new head coach. He's an excellent and well-founded reputation for developing players, and he is an outstanding progressive coach who is aligned with our playing identity and naturally fits within our structure alongside Mike Dodds and the wider team." Michael Beale said, "It's a huge honour to be joining the Sunderland family, and I would like to thank Kirill, Christian, and the rest of the executive team for their faith and responsibility they have placed in me. The existing coaching team deserves huge credit for the way they navigated in the interim period, and like all the staff at the club, they will continue to be vitally important moving forward alongside the incredible fan that makes Sunderland such a historic and unique club." Kirill Lucas concluded, "I'm thrilled to welcome Michael to the club and wish him every success at the period at Stadium Light. For our discussion, it is clear that he shares our ideals and implementing a high-performance culture, and he is committed to playing style that we feel is essential to our progress. I would also like to place on record my gratitude to Mike Dodds and our coaching team for not only leading us through this interim period, but for adopting a bold and creative approach that inspired memorable back-to-back wins. Alongside Michael, I truly believe our people will continue to drive the club forward as we enter 2024 with renewed energy, excitement, and optimism." Right.
Mouthful, innit?
Where do we start from here? Let's talk about his win percentage at Rangers. Bit deceiving.
Yeah.
In the league, obviously, let's be honest, and I'm not disrespecting the teams in Scotland. It is nowhere near the level of the Championship. He used that as his saying it's the best win percentage in top flight history for Rangers. I think is a bit disrespectful to the previous managers that actually were successful at Rangers. Your Walker Smiths and your Dick Advocats, and I feel that's a cheap way to sell that you've got a really successful coach. Because then he was there last season and failed. Let's be honest, he didn't really get close to Celtic in the league, and he didn't really do well in Europe either. So a bit disappointing on that front. Secondly, the pathway. I'm baffled by this pathway thing because he hasn't really settled at a club. So
No.
where do you start from there?
It's just all a bit odd, isn't it? I mean, let's be fair. You can spin any stat to make anyone look good or bad, depending on what your narrative or agenda is. There's no doubt in that. And obviously, it suits in this instance to exclude the European woes at times this season, and obviously what the most recent stats are from the current season. But it is factual. We can't argue with it. There's no doubt in that towards the end, not just the results at Rangers were being criticised, but the playing style as well for being very passive. And one of the criticisms that Michael Beale's had at both clubs is what their team does without the ball. So not long before he left QPR, he came to Luton in an away game, and they were so poor without the ball. They were just overrun easily. And he gets a bit of a free pass for QPR. I always say this, when after he rejected the Wolves job and went on his big rant about loyalty and sticking with it, they were crap. He picked up something like 1 or 2 points in his last 5 games. The rot had started before he left, and it obviously continued throughout the season. But I think people forget he didn't just leave them at the top of the league. They had a little fall before he went, and he got out before he was probably going to end up being pushed a bit later on in the year. Didn't do a brilliant job at Rangers. Okay, they were probably out of the title race when he took over to an extent, but didn't get any closer. And yes, they beat Celtic after Celtic had already won the league. And they got to a Scottish Cup final, or a League Cup final, sorry, but you would expect them to. And again, against Celtic, came up second best. And let's be brutally honest about this. There's a lot of Sunderland fans who aren't happy. There's a lot of fans that are ridiculing it to an extent, and I kind of understand why. Very similar to the Rooney one. I don't think he's as bad as people make out. I think the problem that people have is a lot don't see him as an upgrade on Mowbray, which I would agree with. I don't think his progressive playing style is much different to Mowbray's, except for Mowbray's is a bit quicker on the ball to watch and perhaps a little bit more organised off it. And while they may end up being more aggressive and more attacking, we've seen another club this season, and that hasn't always led to better results. So I'm a bit concerned about it. And I guess for the Sunderland fans, the other worry is if by chance this appointment does go well and it does work out and they start brilliantly for the next 3 months, we all know what's going to happen if there's any interest in him. So there's not really a win here for Sunderland fans, is there? Because either he doesn't do as well or he does the same as Mowbray just for the extra cost of changing a manager, or he does well and then we know that he's not going to be loyal in 3 months' time unless he's had a sudden change of his leopards never change their spots, isn't that the old saying? So, I don't know what to say about it other than I'm
Zebra never changes
surprised.
stripes or something? Is it Zebra never changes stripes or something like that? Whatever
It was a bad
phrase
thing
is.
to bring up. I apologise.
I think the way I look at Michael Beale is a lot of smug when he's doing well, but if he's doing poorly, he'll deflect. I feel obviously at the time I think it was a bad move to go to Rangers. It was a bad. I'm glad he didn't take the Wolves job at the time, but then he took the Rangers job because obviously European football. Obviously that's the sell point. No, not like that. But and plus you obviously there as a coach under Steven Gerrard. But this is much harder. You get more out of your learning as a head coach at a championship club than I feel at Rangers. What has Michael Beale done to really progress? You can't say that he has, him coaching wise, has progressed. If he really wanted to develop his coaching, he probably should have stuck at QPR. And this is just a easy get out for him to get back on the map, be a top coach. I don't see that personally happening at Sunderland because regardless, I don't think Sunderland fans will accept it.
No, I think you're probably right with that. And the problem is that we've seen this before at a few clubs in the last year or so. If the fans aren't on board with a manager from the start, it's going to be tricky. Now, look, the Sunderland fans, you've mentioned them. They are football in the Northeast is great. They're going to support him for the first few games. But we mentioned it with the Rooney one a few weeks ago, which so far, bar last week, has been proven right. If you don't get off to a good start and you're following a successful manager, it's not going to last long before people start to turn on you. And my biggest worry is without the ball. I don't understand, and I know I'm starting to make myself sound like an old fart, and I know we have these conversations a lot on the podcast, but I don't understand this progressive football line when Tony Mowbray's football was attacking, effective, but you've got to be organised at the back still. And it was the biggest problem with Beale's Rangers, and was to an extent a problem at the end with QPR as well, is they were so passive and unorganised without the ball. They were easy to score against. And I mean, we saw what happened to them away in Europe with Rangers. They weren't just beaten, they were demolished and they fell apart. And the body language coming from the sideline on that day at PSV was frightening, in my opinion. Obviously, one of my close mates I grew up with is a Rangers fan. He was tearing his hair out that night, and it was strange to watch because his body language was awful in the situation. And it does worry me for Sunderland. The simplest way to sum it up is I don't feel they've got an upgrade. I don't feel Beale is a terrible coach. And I do like to an extent, and the thing that gives me a bit of hope for Sunderland is that they've not brought in his backroom team. They've not bought it or given him any sane transfers as well. He is there directly as the head coach. And if you look at Rangers, the people he had an input in the signing of have not hit the ground running. If you have a look at the staff he's taken with him in other places, it's obviously not worked out in those jobs. So I think Sunderland are very much going for a yes man to fit in his structure. You look at perhaps their first choice, which looked like it might have been Will Still, and there was a problem with backroom team. That's the only thing that gives me hope. I'm trying to be positive for Sunderland fans because they're a club I've got a bit of a soft spot for. I love North East football, but I do really worry about this appointment. It just, when you go to an area, you've got Tony Mowbray, as much as he's a bit of an old moaner and whatever else, he's a passionate football man and he'll get you on side if you're a supporter of that club. Whereas I'm not sure that's the case here. I just feel it's going to be a little bit too passive and a little bit too lacking in passion for Sunderland. And I just don't see it being an improvement. But I'm pleased for the
No,
assistant, if
well,
nothing else.
the thing is, they've got good young players in that side. I think Mowbray was doing them right. Obviously, getting them in. Obviously, we all know championships are ruthless, a division as it is. But I think he was molding them well. I think they would have been much better next season if they kept most of that squad. Next season, I think they'd be probably up in the top two if they kept under Mowbray. But I don't know yet. But we'll get into that bit in a minute. But let's have a look at his few games, first 5 games, shall I say. So obviously Sunderland got Coventry next at home, and then Beale's first game will be Hull City away and against Liam Rose Senior, who just signed a new contract. So congratulations to him. Rotherham on the 29th, and then Preston on New Year's Day, and then a massive FA Cup tie against Newcastle.
Oh yes. It is it's a pretty interesting start, isn't it? There's a couple of games in there that you would say, based on those teams' form, we should be winning. I know Rotherham have got a new manager, but they've struggled a lot this season, and even at home, while competitive, they've not picked up bundles of points. Preston are in shocking form. Coventry have drawn a lot this season. Hull have been pretty decent, and then you've got the Newcastle game, which obviously is going to be the be-all and end-all. And one of the accusations of him at Rangers, and one of the things that frustrated the fans there the most, was that he talked a lot, and there were a lot of excuses when they were losing games rather than responsibility and just doing the job, which obviously they've got in their new man now. And if they have a poor performance against Newcastle and he does that, that could be the game where it goes wrong. And then you look at the little run they've got after that, where they come up against Ipswich and Hull again, but Hull away from home, Middlesbrough after that. I mean, it's a very tricky run of games. So he's got to get off to a good start. There are at least 2 of those next 4 games are very winnable, but it's how he gets on in those first couple as well. It's going to be a tricky spell for him. Obviously, the January window opens after that. I would expect interest in a couple of Sunderland players. You mentioned Jack Clarke, who's been started the season brilliantly at least, and a couple of others who are impressing. Talk about Bellingham already. I don't. It's a bit of a weird one. I don't know what to expect because, despite my reservations, I don't feel it's going to be a complete and utter failure. But I just don't feel it's going to be an improvement on Mowbray. And obviously, you look, they're 7th in the table at the minute. They're still right up there in the playoff mix because the interim did well after Mowbray. But I guess the only positive you can take from it, as you mentioned, is Mowbray was great at guiding young players. Mick Beale, as a youth coach, always had a good reputation for doing the same. You just have to hope he can deliver that. But I do worry for his start in the Championship. But then he hit QPR and started like a house on fire before it fell apart. So maybe we're getting worked up for nothing. Maybe we're jumping on the bandwagon and getting Sunderland fans irate for no reason. Maybe they'll be brilliant. But for me, they have to win at least 2 of those first 3 games. Looking at Preston and Rotherham, the form they're in, they have to be picking up points before they get to Newcastle. Because if they go into that with a little bit of a whimper and with Mick Beale under a bit of pressure already, could be a very, very long spell for him.
I see the Newcastle game as a free hit. I know it's Newcastle, it's your main rivals, but obviously it's a derby. But you need to put up a fight. If you don't put up a fight in that game, then they will turn.
Yeah, I'll go to
they will definitely turn in that game. And obviously, yeah, you don't want to lose your main rivals at home. But yeah, I think it'd be a slow start for Mick Beale. I really do. He's got to win people over. It will take time. Obviously, this is a very busy period. Obviously, Christmas it's short, sharp, quick game, so he hasn't really got time to put his emphasis on how he wants the team to play. Probably tweak it a little bit more. Obviously, he wants a progressive style of play. Well, it's rubbish. So it'll take time for him he'll need that break in January after the FA Cup tie to fully bed in what he wants, because it's just, as I said, it's just game. So it will take a bit of time for me. It's timing of point is not ideal. It's a contract to summer of 2026. How do you see it happening?
Well, I think the last one, weirdly, with Rotherham is one of the first where we agreed actually the manager could see out a contract and well beyond the average lifespan. I think we'll both be in agreement here for a different reason, let's be honest with it. But and I don't think it's necessarily because he'll fail, but I go back to what I said at the start, which is if he doesn't do well, he'll obviously be moved on because Tony Mowbray's overachievement harmed him this season. Mick Beale's at least got to match it now. And if he does well, he's shown at no stage in his career any sign of loyalty. So whatever happens here, I can't see a scenario where he's here in 2026. I don't think it's quite the right fit for Sunderland, if I'm being honest. But equally, I don't think it'll be as disastrous as some of because let's be honest, this has caused a bit of a meltdown, hasn't it, with the reaction on social media. I don't think it's quite going to be that bad, but I can just see it being average. I can see them finishing in the lower end of the top half this year, probably losing the chance at the playoffs that they might have had under Mowbray. And then it's all going to come down to what happens in the transfer windows. But for Mick Beale, it's an important job for him. I know we've mentioned a lot about the Sunderland bit, but he has to get this one right after walking away from QPR early, after not having a great start to the season at Rangers. It's one for him where he has to get right, or he might not get another chance to start from this level again.
No, unless he gets like if he doesn't do well at Sunderland, you can see him being going back to a assistant head coach or whatever. I could see him lasting a year. I think he'll get a summer, and then that's when I think hopefully Sunderland will start to say, right, okay, we're giving you two transfer windows. Let's see what you can do. Are we actually making a move forward? Yes, no. And if it gets to this stage next year and they're not really progressed, then I can't really see it happening. So I'm going to say a year. I don't like to give managers time. I like to see him do well, give him their due, but I'm just worried about this. If he gets on a bit of form, he might deflect and blame everyone else. That's my opinion.
I wouldn't disagree with it.
So that's our thoughts on the sacking of Tony Mowbray and the hiring of Mick Beale as Sunderland head coach. Do you agree with us or disagree with us? Let us know down in the comments. You can follow us on our socials, Twitter X and Instagram and TikTok at the Honest Football Podcast. There will be championship predictions, but there won't be a Luton much of a Luton preview of the circumstances of last weekend. And we wish Tom Lockyer a full speedy recovery.
Absolutely.
And we'll see you next time.